This month on In the Life, we're highlighting heroes of the gay and lesbian community, just ordinary people doing extraordinary things. In Los Angeles, gay activist Phill Wilson has one mission: to mobilize the African-American community against the spread of AIDS.
AIDS is a disease of poverty. It's a disease of the most vulnerable among us.
The recent sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church has spawned a dangerous game of blame the gays. We find out who's taking a stand when it comes to this serious case of scapegoating.
I think it's a mistake to confuse the issue of homosexuality or gay priests with the issue of pedophilia. They're not the same issue.
Also, once again, we'll salute Father Mychal Judge, a gay priest whose heroics became world-renowned on September 11th.
And all of a sudden, his fire department beepers went off, and he was out the door. That was the last I saw him.
In Reel to Reel, filmmaker and minister Mackie Alston embarks on a spiritual journey in his new film, Questioning Faith, Confessions of a Seminarian. In Princess Anne, Maryland, these two friends of fowl are saving the animal world one chicken at a time.
People arrive at an understanding of animal activism in very different ways. For us, it was just a logical widening of other human rights.
Plus, Andy Hum goes out and about, and our resident commentator, Harvey Fierstein, gives us something to talk about in Outtakes. All of this and more in our Heroes edition of In the Life.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Ford Foundation, the Gill Foundation, the Pride Foundation, the Ted Snowden Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, the Collingwood Foundation, the Reed Williams Foundation, and the annual support of In the Life members like you.
Welcome to the show. I'm Katherine Linton. On this edition of In the Life, we're going to introduce you to a few heroes, people who have committed their lives to making a difference, not for glory or financial gain, but because it's part of who they are. They're not only a credit to the gay community, but to everyone, everywhere. Our first hero is Phill Wilson, a man whose mission is getting the African-American community, in which AIDS is at an all-time high, to face the facts. It's been a hard-fought battle in a community facing racism, poverty, and poor access to health care. Phil's solution? Get out there and teach people that their lives are worth saving. That's why he founded the African-American AIDS Policy and Training Institute in Los Angeles.
There's a huge AIDS crisis for the African-American community. 62% of all women with AIDS are black. 40% of all men with AIDS are black. Now, when you have prevalence rates and incidence rates among young black men that are going through the roof, yeah, there's a crisis going on, and we need to do something about it. And the we now is both the gay community and the African-American community. We all need to do something about it.
In 1999, Phill Wilson mobilized a group of colleagues to look at the epidemic in a systematic way, and the African-American AIDS Policy and Training Institute was formed.
The Institute is the only black HIV/AIDS think tank in the country. We train people in the basic science of AIDS. We train people in organizational development. We train people in prevention and policy. We disseminate information through a number of ways, through a newsletter, through a website, through events, from what we call a uniquely and unapologetically black point of view.
The motto of the organization is our people, our problem, our solution. And what that means is that we do things for us, by us. We believe that within the black community, nothing's going to happen unless we start to take action and responsibility for that.
The Institute is located in one of the hardest hit parts of Los Angeles, the Pico Union District, the epicenter of the epidemic.
We have people who are Korean, we have Latinos, we have African Americans. Also, this is one of the places from which folks who were incarcerated are released. There's also sex workers who work here, and there is a large number of substance use going on around here as well.
Despite the AIDS crisis in the African-American community, many activists believe that black organizations have been slow to develop an infrastructure dedicated to fighting the epidemic.
if there weren't gay AIDS organizations, we would not have been as effective as we were in the gay community in fighting the disease, you know. And so you think we would have learned that if you want to deal with the disease among women or you want to deal with the disease among ethnic minorities, that there have to be strong indigenous organizations to deal with those diseases in those communities. And I don't think that there's a commitment to doing that, and that's race-driven.
I think that there are always things that white organizations can bring into the Black community, but I think ultimately for effective work to happen, Black organizations need to be intimately involved in that process.
While there is a call for Black organizations to take action, many are hesitant to add AIDS programming to their agendas because they are already dealing with a host of other issues.
The crisis in the African American community around HIV and AIDS is from a number of things. You know, part of it is still rooted in the history and the perception that AIDS was, you know, a gay disease. Part of it is rooted in homophobia in Black communities. The Black institutions are still dealing with violence and, you know, other health issues and unemployment issues and underemployment and infant mortality and civil rights issues. All of those things are still on the plate, and so people have to juggle how they spend their time and the resources that they have. And there's denial across the board. You know, there's denial. AIDS is a very frightening thing, and if people can not deal with it, often they will choose not to deal with it.
The Institute's mission is to organize other Black groups, including civil rights organizations, churches, sororities, and fraternities, and assist them in developing HIV and AIDS education and treatment programs that can be incorporated into what they already do. This candlelight vigil in March, held in the Watts section of Los Angeles, is an example of the Institute's collaboration with faith-based, civil rights, and service organizations.
People ask me what kind of motivated me to become an activist to the degree that I am. And part of it is race, and part of it is class, and part of it is, you know, age and geography. I grew up in Chicago in the late 50s and throughout the 60s, and that was a time of lots of activities. You know, I was a young boy doing the Martin Luther King marches in Chicago, and my parents were actively engaged. I saw things that did not seem to me to be right. In 1980, I just come out. My partner and I went to the doctor, and our doctors talked to us about this thing that he had seen, and it involved gay men somehow, and it involved swollen lymph nodes, but he didn't know anything. And my partner and I said that our lymph nodes had been swollen for some time, and so the doctor took a biopsy and discovered that our lymph nodes were abnormal, but he didn't know what that meant. Shortly after that, we moved to Los Angeles, and it became pretty obvious what was happening. Our friends were getting sick, and our friends were dying. If you were a person of conscience, you had to get involved. And so we got involved in the beginning days because we felt we needed to know. We felt that it was going to be about us.
In the early 80s, AIDS was considered to be a gay, white male disease. Now, with the current staggering numbers of African Americans stricken with HIV and AIDS, there are concerns that racism has played a role in the epidemic.
Racism particularly is a player in the HIV/AIDS pandemic because race drives so many things in this country. There was a study that was released recently that showed if you are Black, the quality of your HIV health care is less than if you are white, and that crosses class lines and geography and insurance and employment and health status.
In an effort to study the effects of HIV and AIDS as it affects communities of color, the Institute established Crossroads Medical, a Brooklyn, New York-based model program. Dr. Diana Williamson is its medical director.
I wouldn't say that traditional white organizations have failed African American communities. I would say that the majority population, which is the traditional white population in general, doesn't understand African American communities. And many times they think that they do. And that the increasing numbers show that the government, pharmaceutical companies, and traditional white organizations have not understood. There is a major epidemic of HIV, but there's an epidemic within the epidemic, and that's an epidemic related to poverty. And the poverty is more important than the risk factors in terms of the body fluids. And people who are poor do things that they would not ordinarily do if they weren't hungry and if they weren't homeless. And that the social structure in the United States allows people who are poor to continue to have the burden of disease that we don't see in other social economic status classes. And that is the root of it. It's not African Americans don't wear condoms. It's poor people in general don't wear condoms.
AIDS is a disease of poverty. It's a disease of the most vulnerable among us, you know, and as a result of that, you know, race is an issue, and poverty is an issue, and class is an issue, and gender is an issue. And on the flip side of that, it seems that there is a belief in parts of the gay community that this is no longer a gay issue. And for me, that's problematic on two fronts. It's problematic because clearly it is still a gay issue. Minimally, it's an issue among gay men of color. You know, and so either we're making a decision that gay men of color don't count, which is a concern that I have. But secondly, it's an issue for the gay community because in the early 80s and the mid 80s and the early 90s, we said that we were going to be involved in fighting this thing until it was over. You know, and I remember the posters that said, until there's a cure. You know, well, there's not a cure yet, and it's not over, and we have, you know, a commitment, a promise that we have to keep.
For an activist, fighting the AIDS crisis is not only challenging, it's life-consuming. And for Phill, this battle is deeply personal.
Part of the challenge in doing this work is trying to have a life. So being at home is really important also. At home involves, you know, spending time with my nephews.
My uncle's being gay and having AIDS, that's not an issue for me because, you know, we family and we stick together, we love each other no matter what, you know. And I keep my uncle healthy and, you know, he keeps me healthy, we keep each other going.
And I'm convinced that particularly in addressing HIV and AIDS with young people, we're not going to get there just by AIDS 101 stuff and teaching about prevention and teaching about treatment. I think we're going to get there, at least with Black youth, in finding ways to get young people to think about their lives, which will influence the choices that they make and will determine whether or not they put themselves at risk or not.
I traveled with them. We did a thing in South Africa. And, you know, there's a lot of AIDS going on in South Africa. We did the march and, you know, we did all the things dealing with the conference and stuff. So, you know, this constantly process goes on and on.
Well, I've been extremely privileged in that people talk to me and they think that the work that we do here has touched their lives. And so I have people who write me or call me and say, I saw you do, you know, a speech, or I saw something you wrote. I speak with people regularly who have decided to reconcile relationships with their families. You know, I've spoken to people who say that they've reclaimed their churches. I mean, that is like really a remarkable thing to have happened to you, and I'm grateful for that.
Another way the African American AIDS Policy and Training Institute reaches the community is through peer educators who provide patients with important HIV information. They also develop individualized treatment plans and assist patients in advocating for better health care. Coming up later in the show, we'll meet two women who have found the answer to the age-old question, why did the chicken cross the road?
This is the gentleman. He loves the ladies.
And on Reel to Reel, we'll meet director Mackie Alston and preview his new documentary, Questioning Faith.
I can't explain why God would let so many terrible things take place. But watching people walk through their lives and be present for each other somehow provided a solution.
Plus, we'll pay tribute to the beloved Father Mychal Judge, a gay Catholic priest who will go down in history as one of the heroes of 9/11.
I came out of one of the talk shows in June of '93, and I started to tour. And the first place I went was Kansas City, Missouri, and I did a club called, I think it was called Stanford's Comedy House. And this guy named Fred Phelps decided he wanted to pick at me. Now, for those of you who don't know who Fred is, he's this guy that has the godshatesfags.com website, and he goes to people's funerals who've died of AIDS and pickets them. He's an awful person, and he's 5 minutes away from his own trial. And I had no idea how it would make me feel, having all these people in front of the club picketing me. And it really scared me because I was beat up a lot as a kid for being gay, and it brought back a lot of really uncomfortable memories. But across the street were these kids picketing the picketers, carrying signs with covers of videos of movies that I had done, and they asked for autographs and were so sweet and so supportive. And it was just so touching. And then I walked into the club, got ready to do my show. And before I went on, I got a standing ovation. Before I said a word, I had no idea the power of coming out. I'm Jason Stewart, and you're watching In the Life.
Here's our resident man about town, Andy Hum, with Out and About.
From penguins to Pride Fest, from glitter to gadabouts, July is the month to get out and get gay. I'm Andy Hum, and it's time to go out and about. First, a news update. In June of 2001, the bruised and broken body of transgendered Native American teen Fred Martinez Jr. was found in a ravine outside Cortez, Colorado. Martinez had been savagely beaten with a rock and left to die. The murderer, then 18-year-old Sean Murphy, reportedly bragged to his friends that he'd, quote, beaten up a fag. After his arrest, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder to avoid a trial and possible death sentence. In May, he petitioned to withdraw his guilty plea, but then decided to accept his sentence, which was due in early June. Despite numerous hate-related murders in Colorado, the state has no hate crimes law on its books. Martinez's murder has added fresh impetus to past legislation protecting every citizen. Though the recovery period has ended at ground zero, gay and lesbian partners who lost loved ones still struggle to rebuild their lives, often without the relief funds that are readily available to heterosexual married couples. The latest news for surviving same-sex partners is that they will be eligible for money from the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund if there is no objection from the blood relatives of the deceased. If the next of kin does object, those funds could go to the relatives instead of the domestic partner left behind. Cases involving heterosexual domestic partners will be reviewed in the same way. The International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, or EAGLE-HRC, is a San Francisco-based group that aims to end human rights violations against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered people worldwide. At recent events in the Bay Area and New York, activists from Colombia, Egypt, and China were honored with EAGLE-HRC's Philippa Award for their outstanding advocacy and courage. From same-sex conjugal visit rights to censorship, the honorees have waged inspiring battles in the fight against violence, discrimination, and prejudice in their home countries. They're here, they're queer, and they just might be headed your way. Mike Glatz and Benji Nickum are the brainpowers behind Young Gay America, a web-based traveling outreach organization.
What we do is drive around North America interviewing gay and lesbian, transgender, intersex, bisexual, whatever youth, in the aims of reducing isolation and sort of weaving a thread of communication across America.
We thought also we could bring resources to places that can't get them, because we could connect with groups in DC and New York, LA, San Francisco.
Kids can read about Mike and Benji's exploits online and email in their own stories.
We've noticed that gay youth actually really legitimately are happy everywhere. Like, even in a place like Helena, even in a place like Boise, it's amazing. It's just, they're everywhere. It's like a critical mass we've reached.
Sapphic seagulls, same-sex saltwater specimens. What new wonders could the New York Aquarium on Coney Island possibly have in store? How about gay penguins? Meet Cass and Wendell, two gay birds of a feather that flock together.
I sort of figured out that they might both be males, and then we did a blood test a couple of years ago, which confirmed that. Cass seems to be the more dominant of the couple. Wendell is a little bit more a nervous bird. On average, most of these birds are monogamous. Most of the couples have been together for 10 or so years.
So, the next time you're bird watching, pay close attention to our tuxedoed friends. You may find you have more in common with them than you think.
It happens just in animals just like it does in the human animal.
the city of brotherly love was the place to be for Pride Fest America's 10th annual confab this past April.
Pride Fest America has grown into the largest annual GLBT forum for our international community. This year we have over 60 programs and 80 regional, national, and international organizations.
Symposia, panels, parties, and street fairs were the order of the day during the week-long meeting of the minds that brought together some of the world's top gay and lesbian movers and shakers, like Real World star Chris Beckman and MTV Entertainment prexy Brian Graydon.
The African-American civil rights movement was an American civil rights movement. Feminism was an international civil rights movement. We are an international civil rights movement, and we are at the epicenter of that movement right now. It's important that we have an annual forum where we get together in all of our component parts and look at where we've been, where we're at, and perhaps where we should be going.
To kick off our cultural roundup, it's off to New York's Guggenheim Museum on Fifth Avenue. That was the venue for a recent concert featuring contemporary composers whose lives have been affected by HIV and AIDS, sponsored by the Estate Project.
Tonight's event was part of the Estate Project Music Archive, which is our effort to preserve and promote the work of composers living with AIDS or lost to AIDS.
We've reached out to composers living with HIV and AIDS, trying to help them in very practical ways about their career to offset the effects that the disease may have brought in their lives.
I actually didn't start composing professionally until I came out about the virus. My sister said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to write music."
The estate giving me organizational assistance and the kind of inspiration that I needed. And so this is an amazing kind of thing.
I think it's fantastic that these concerts are taking place to draw attention not only to composers who have passed away, but to celebrate musicians living with HIV and still being vitally creative.
And it's not just music. The Estate Project also works to preserve and promote all manner of creative endeavor.
To quote Ned Rorem, there's no such thing as gay music, there's only gay composers, and that's our focus.
If you treat go dancing like an art, you get treated like an art piece.
Philippine-born and LA bred, performance artist Noel Alumit is quickly emerging as a voice to be reckoned with. His one-man shows, The Rice Room, Scenes from a Bar, about desire, survival, sex, fate, and joy, and Master of the Miss Universe, about a gay man's search for beauty in an unbeautiful world, have seduced audiences across the country.
My first show explored gay Asian life. My second show is a little more personal.
And now Noel's gone literary.
Letters to Montgomery Clift is the coming of age of a young gay Filipino boy during the 1970s, and his family was abducted by the Marcos regime in the Philippines. He's sent to the United States to live a life. One of the ways that he can deal with the fact that his parents are gone is by holding on to and obsessing over the wonderful film actor Montgomery Clift. This book is about endurance. This book is about coming out. This book is about going home and what home means to people.
Log on to inthelifetv.org to find links to many of the organizations we profiled this month. I'm Andy Hum, and you've been Out and About.
Still to come on this edition of In the Life, documentarian and minister Mackie Alston explores the world of religion in his new film, Questioning Faith.
Whatever we believe, whether we don't believe in a God or do, or believe in something else, something's going to hit us. Something in life is going to take place that's going to make us question what we believe.
We'll meet two mother hens who have created a sanctuary where wayward chickens can come home to roost. And Harvey Fierstein lets off some steam in Outtakes. All this and more as In the Life continues.
I'm Judy Shepard, and you are watching In the Life.
Homosexuality in Catholicism. It's a subject we first covered in 1995. and one that's back in the news in connection with the sex abuse scandal rocking the very foundations of the Catholic Church. Here's In the Life's Jonathan Capehart with more.
Experts on sexual offenders warn that the recent scandal in the Catholic Church has caused two very different issues to become erroneously linked: homosexuality and sexual abuse. They state that homosexuals are no more likely than heterosexuals to become pedophiles.
I think it's a mistake to confuse the issue of homosexuality or gay priests with the issue of pedophilia. They're not the same issue. Homosexuality is not pedophilia. People who have sex with children are not gay. They are pedophiles.
Despite these findings, some church officials, including the Vatican's press secretary and the president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, have put the blame for the sex abuse scandal on gay priests. In a homily in New York's St. Patrick's Cathedral, Monsignor Eugene Clark even argued that it was a, quote, grave mistake, end quote, to allow gays in the priesthood.
There was a response to Monsignor Clark's remarks, a public response at St. Patrick's Cathedral. I was there myself, and the simple message was that the church should not be scapegoating the gay community for the abuse. We are calling for repudiation of those statements, those inaccurate and harmful statements. The hierarchy well knows that gay priests are not the problem.
The issue is whether or not a person can keep a vow of celibacy, not the issue what is the sexual orientation of the person. So there are obviously people who believe that gay people cannot keep their vows. I don't think that they are correct. I don't think that a person's sexual orientation gives you any indication of whether or not a person can or cannot keep their vows.
The Vatican has already announced that there will be special visits to all of the seminaries in the United States. And I fear that there will be a very strong attempt to weed out any gay candidates for the priesthood. I think there also may be an attempt to pressure gay priests.
Lost in the debate about gays in the priesthood is an acknowledgement of the good work that the majority of gay priests do for their congregations. Priests like the late Father Mychal Judge, who died a hero in the line of duty on September 11th.
Clearly, this was a man who was a wonderful priest. Everyone agreed on that. He had hundreds of friends. But the fact that he was gay certainly informed his work. It helped him gain a sense of empathy for the people on the margins of society.
Remembering priests like Father Mychal Judge may help focus the Catholic faithful on the real issues involving priests and sex abuse.
I don't believe the problem is homosexuality in the priesthood. The problem is really a breakdown in the trust between the church officials and their parishioners. That's a bigger problem for them.
My hope is that the many clergy, both gay and straight, who realize that the issue of homosexuality is simply a diversion from the real issue of sexual abuse and the real issue of authority in the church and how it is arrived at. I hope that those priests will speak loudly and clearly.
In the aftermath of the September 11th terrorist attacks, much has been said about the life and untimely death of Father Mychal Judge. Tonight, we pay tribute once again to this celebrated hero who was a brave fire chaplain, a compassionate priest, and a steadfast friend to the gay and lesbian community. A picture was the world's introduction to Father Mychal Judge, a snapshot of a man killed in the line of duty moments after the attack on the World Trade Center. In an instant, his lifeless body blanketed in the dust and debris of destruction, Father Mychal became a national hero. But as the weeks and months since the terror attack slip away, a more complex portrait of Father Mychal is coming to light. Like all of us, he was a complicated person, but above all else, he was a priest.
Mychal's character was defined very much by his priesthood and being a Franciscan.
Father Brian Carroll is a fellow friar at St. Francis of Assisi Church in Manhattan. The two of them shared a friendship that lasted more than 20 years.
Mychal was a really dear friend of mine, and not only a dear friend, but I'd consider him a role model. We'd be walking down the street, and he would hand out money to anybody. And by the time we got to a restaurant, we didn't have anything to spend. We couldn't get dinner. We'd end up getting a cup of coffee because he would have given everything away.
As fire chaplain, Father Mychal also devoted much of his life ministering to New York City's fire department. His church is directly across the street from one of the firehouses.
He always had the right thing to say. He always put you at ease. If you had a problem, you could talk to him. And he just made our life easier, you know. I don't know how we're going to replace him.
Many of his friends and colleagues have called him a bridge between communities. Father Mychal also reached across denominations and forged a strong friendship with Reverend Fanny Erickson of New York's Riverside Church.
I would say he was deep, brilliant, worried a lot, but he was brave. He had a bit of the leprechaun in him, and he really understood what ministry was about.
Since his death, we have learned this man's ministry went far beyond religion and the fire department. It extended into the gay and lesbian community. Many gay newspapers and magazines have profiled Mychal Judge, not only concerning his outreach, but also frankly discussing the Catholic priest's own sexuality.
Trust me, he'd probably be delighted to see himself on the front cover of The Advocate magazine, along with all the other hunks that normally fill that page.
Brendan Fay, one of the driving forces behind the gay Irish organization Lavender and Green, would certainly know. He and his partner were good friends of Father Mychal Judge.
I would say being gay and being Catholic, for many, it's a tremendous conflict. And I would say for Mychal, the challenge was not being gay and Catholic, the challenge was being honest and acceptance.
One of Father Mychal's riskiest moves also serves as one of his defining moments. In March 2000, New York City's first all-inclusive St. Patrick's Day parade took place in Queens and openly embraced gays and lesbians. Father Mychal helped fund the event, and to the delight of organizers, he showed up in his cassock, marched in the parade, and offered a prayer.
Give us good health, peace, happiness, and joy in the parade, and a wonderful blessing for the day. Amen.
Amen. There was a wonderful spirit in the parade. But to be honest, there was also the boos, the screams. And as a Franciscan, as a priest, he was the focus and target of some of the boos and the screams that day. He had a terrific sense of humor. And he'd either say, Jesus, he'd said, the height of madness. God help them, you know?
On October 11th, hundreds of people packed a small chapel in Manhattan for a ceremony called A Month's Mind, an Irish tradition of remembering a loved one through stories told exactly 1 month after their death. Lavender and Green organized the event, which was filled with people, gay and straight, who knew Father Mychal.
He was a very affable, a very sociable sort of a man, and he moved in all sorts of circles.
He always seemed to capture a little bit of you, a little essence of you, and he was always one of those people when you saw him made you smile.
Many of those touched by Father Mychal's death never even knew him, including Tom Ryan, an openly gay New York City firefighter.
I had heard that he was a gay priest, and I'm an out gay firefighter and president of Firefighting EMS, and I never wanted to compromise his position with the church, and I regret that now, that I didn't get to know him.
And he put himself at risk by revealing himself, for example, to people in the gay community. When they needed to have their lives affirmed, and speaking in the third person wouldn't do, Mychal would reveal himself to them and give them the gift of himself.
But on September 11th, after the planes crashed into the Twin Towers, Father Mychal would give of himself one final time.
I said, Mike, there's been a disaster. A plane just hit the World Trade Center. I saw it. And he jumped up from the couch and he said, oh my God. And I said, they're going to need you. And all of a sudden his fire department beepers went off and he was out the door. And that was the last I saw him.
So when I got the call, it was such, it was so sad. In fact, it was truly like I had lost a lover, lost a friend. And we have.
He had a special gift given to him by God. You know, he was the first one. Everyone who was killed down there was given a number, and he was number one. So we like to say that was because he was there to lead everybody into heaven.
In 1950, a United States Senate report targeted homosexuals as a government security risk. Untold numbers of suspected gay men and lesbians lost their jobs. Today, just over 50 years later, the Human Rights Campaign has identified well over 2,000 companies, colleges and universities, state and local governments, and federal agencies that have written non-discrimination policies covering sexual orientation. I'm Sam Behrens. You're watching In the Life.
In this edition of Reel to Reel, we'll take a look at a compelling documentary called Questioning Faith, Confessions of a Seminarian. After the death of a close friend from AIDS, award-winning filmmaker and out-gay minister Mackie Alston was devastated. So he set out to explore life, death, and religion. And through his journey, he encountered people with a wide range of religious backgrounds, each wrestling with their own faith in the face of tragedy or hardship.
Questioning Faith is about what happens to people's religious convictions when crisis strikes. And it was born when I was at seminary studying to become a minister. I lost my close friend, Alan Smith, to AIDS, just as he began his ministry. We were at seminary together, and we're almost like brothers, two white, gay, Southern men who shared a sense of humor and who really believed that God wanted us to be ministers. Gay men, yes, and ministers too. And when Alan died, I think it made me question everything that I had believed to date. I think in making a film about it, I thought, this is something that everybody faces in life. Whatever we believe, whether we don't believe in a God or do, or believe in something else, something's gonna hit us. Something in life is gonna take place that's going to make us question what we believe. It was very important to me in Questioning Faith to tell many stories, not just my own story, not just the story of my friend who I lost, but to take the opportunity of being in seminary and wrestling with faith myself to weave together many stories. I wanted to tell a story about people's religious lives, and I wanted to tell a story that included many different expressions, somehow permitting every viewer to believe what he or she believes and to engage from wherever he or she sits. So, for example, in one film, you have stories of Christians, of Jews, of Buddhists, of Muslims, of atheists. We focused on, for example, Annie Ruth Powell. Annie Powell is the seminary pastor. She is facing cancer, and we walk through the process of hysterectomy, chemotherapy, radiation with her, and facing the end of her life. I think I made Questioning Faith, both because I thought that the process of making the film would answer the questions in my own heart, and in making the film, I would provide something that would help other people who had found themselves in the same situation that I was in. That situation being facing crisis and not knowing how to make sense of it. It seems to me like everybody in the film contributed questions as I was trying to figure out my own answers. I watched person after person somehow fight for life and continue to believe in life, regardless of the language they put to that. And sort of quietly, I felt like I was witnessing an answer without understanding it. It's hard to explain because in the end of the film, I really have to say, this is mysterious. I feel like God is present in my life, but still I can't explain why God would let so many terrible things take place. The question I set out asking is the age-old, timeless question that nobody has ever come up with an adequate response to. So who am I to think that Mackie Alston is, in the matter of 3.5 years, going to finally crack the code and come up with the right answer? And I knew that. But at the same time, people go through life with such strong religious convictions that I thought there must be something they've read or something they've figured out that I haven't gotten yet. And maybe if I really focus hard, I'll get it. I think there is something that people have gotten that I hadn't gotten. And I guess what I would say that is a sense that you can't figure it out, that you can't come to an answer intellectually, but that you can in your heart, and that you can in your gut, and that you can reconcile yourself to the mystery of life. Being a filmmaker is attempting with all one's might to make something that might actually change lives, move people in some kind of way. And to me, being a filmmaker is being a minister. My father was a minister, my grandfather was a minister, and in my own way, I too am a minister. One thing I learned in the process of making this film is to be a minister, you don't have to have unshakable faith. It just means you engage certain questions and attempt to make a difference in people's lives.
Questioning Faith airs this month on Cinemax. The film is also being screened across the country as part of an educational outreach program. And now, it's time for something completely different: chickens. People love chickens. In fact, we've often turned them into a source of entertainment. Remember Foghorn Leghorn, Henny Penny, or the summer 2000 film Chicken Run? But what happens in real life when a chicken, on its way to a meat processing plant, makes a break for it? We went to Princess Anne, Maryland to find a new punchline to an old joke. Why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the sanctuary on the other side. Morning comes early for the residents of Princess Anne, Maryland, both feathered and unfeathered. Partners Patrice and Miriam have founded the Eastern Shore Chicken Sanctuary, devoted to rescuing chickens who have literally fallen off the truck on their way to becoming the next McNugget or the reluctant contributor to a breakfast omelet. Once Patrice and Miriam have saved one of these embattled birds, their first order of business is to give their new fowl friend a name.
This is Rosemary. This is Amelia. This is Johnny. This is One-Eyed Jack. This is Wonder. This is Fanny. She's the star of the show. He's named after Antonio Gramsci, an Italian political theorist. This is the gentleman. He loves the ladies.
Patrice and Miriam had always planned on one day having some type of animal sanctuary, but never dreamed they'd be saving chickens.
About a few years ago, we had just moved here, and we were actually driving to the bank to set up our bank account. Turned a corner and saw a chicken in a ditch. Swung the truck around, and I know I had that sick feeling in my stomach that says, my life is gonna change. And I think you did too.
A little bit.
Not so much.
Not as much as me.
And it was quite comedic trying to get that chicken. Miriam was running back and forth across the road trying to pick up the chicken, and then finally caught him. We knew so little about chickens at that point. Miriam ran to the feed store to ask them what would we need and to pick up some fencing material so we could fence off a little area for him. And it all started from there.
What also started was an education in what goes on behind closed doors in meat processing and egg-laying plants. The more Patrice and Miriam learned, the more dedicated they became to their feathered friends.
Look at Fanny's beak. You can see that the tip of it is blunt, and that's because the hens that are in egg factories are all crowded together in these little cages. They can't stand up all the way, they can't stretch their wings, they can't even all lay down at the same time. They have nothing to do all day, so of course they pluck at each other's feathers, they pluck at their own feathers. That's why they cut off their beaks, to keep them from pecking themselves to death in frustration.
People arrive at an understanding of animal activism in very different ways. For us, it was just a logical widening of other human rights.
There are, however, a strong and growing number of lesbians in particular, and also gay men, in the animal liberation movement. And more we are doing what we can to articulate the connections, because we really do see it as one big struggle.
Running a chicken sanctuary just miles from one of the largest poultry processing plants in the country is certainly something to crow about, especially when the local economy is supported by chicken farmers and the poultry industry is quick to refute charges of animal abuse.
Companies are very aware of their obligation to treat animals in a humane fashion, so there can be abuses. If there are, they should not occur, and companies are taking steps, we believe, to make sure that such things do not occur.
Local residents now know where to go whenever they find a chicken who has flown the coop.
You have a chicken for us?
Yes, I do. We found him the town of Snow Hill by a bank.
Oh.
We're not sure, how he got there, but I'd imagine he fell off of the truck.
With the success of their sanctuary, Patrice and Miriam can safely say this is where the chicken and the egg both come first.
Let's have a look.
You ready? Okay. Put you right down near the water. Welcome to Chicken Heaven.
During the decade that In the Life has been on the air, the movement for gay and lesbian civil rights has made progress on a number of fronts. According to the Human Rights Campaign, only 12 companies offered domestic partnership benefits to their employees in 1990. Today, 4,304 employers are known to provide same-sex partnership benefits, including more than 117 state and local governments and 148 companies in the Fortune 500. This represents a 36,000% increase. I'm Patricia Clarkson, and you're watching In the Life.
And in this episode's outtakes, Harvey Fierstein tells us exactly what's on his mind.
Are we ready? Is everybody in place? Props! That seems logical. I was watching ETV's True Hollywood Story of the Brady Bunch, so I guess I deserve what I got. Florence Henderson, hawker of cooking grease and false teeth stickum, was chatting about her TV hubby, Robert Reed. It seems many of the Brady Bunch episodes ended with the two of them in bed all lovey-dovey. She shared that Mr. Reed was so uncomfortable that she could see his little heart beating like a frightened animal through his pajamas. You see, Robert Reed was gay. She then said how fond she was of him and that although gay, he was one of the good ones. A good one. What is that exactly? A good one would be a queer who did everything they could to pass for straight, but failing to do so, accepts his lower placement in society in stride. In fact, the less straight acting, the less acceptability you deserve. In other words, a good one, the opposite of me. Now, I know that if I confronted Pal Floey, she would tell me that I've got her all wrong, that she likes gay people. She's never missed an installment of In the Life in all 10 years, and that she herself is actually a very nice heterosexual. But is she a good one? Does she go out of her way to make sure that no one knows that she's straight? Does she publicly only refer to her husband as partner or friend or roomie? Does she avoid all public displays of affection with said mate? That includes holding hands and furtive glances in restaurants, Missy. Does she drive to another town to buy her magazines, slipping them secretively from their brown paper wrappings before ogling the latest issues of Life, TV Guide, or the Ladies' Home Journal? Does she attend family gatherings unescorted, thus sparing her relatives the embarrassment of having to confront her chosen lifestyle? Does she prove what a good sport she is by laughing loudly at heterosexual jokes? Does she whisper discreetly when, at her local Blockbuster, she can't find the latest Woody Allen movie? It's in the heterosexual interest section, madam. Does she keep what goes on in her bedroom in her bedroom. I'm getting nauseated just thinking about that one. Does she bow her head in shame and silence when attending church services, knowing that the great gay goddess condemns her lifestyle of sin? Good one though she may be, will she remain cooperative when Congress passes laws denying her equal status with homosexuals? Less property rights, no marriage, plus exclusion from government grants and programs, not to mention banishment from the military. Will she remain silent when courts grant charitable institutions the right to discriminate against her? Will she still bow respectfully when she's legally fired from a job and evicted from her home? Will she still be a good one when her children are ripped from her arms because she lives with her husband? Can we count on her good nature when she's beaten in the streets by strangers just for being heterosexual? Forget Florence Henderson. Do you know any heterosexual who would put up with that crap? No? Then why do you?
I'm Katherine Linton. For all of us at In the Life, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next month.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Ford Foundation, the Gill Foundation, the Pride Foundation, the Ted Snowden Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, the Collingwood Foundation, the Reed Williams Foundation, and the annual support of In the Life members like you.